All right, good morning. I am Dr. Bryn Schroeder. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for the School of Education, and we are here today with Dr. Stephanie Mahfood and Dr. Basiyr Rodney. So the two of you are here today to talk about something that is on a lot of people's minds. We're here to kind of have a conversation about how to transform lesson plans that were intended for traditional face-to-face learning and transform that to make it work for the online learning format. So I am going to hand the conversation over to Stephanie and Basiyr here, and I'd like you guys to start just by kind of touching on how has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted this? What are the biggest challenges that educators are facing right now?
Well, I can go ahead and start. I think one of the biggest challenges that educators are facing right now is that school systems are gigantic bureaucratic systems with lots of pieces and lots of parts. And so to thoughtfully kind of turn that whole system around into a different direction is just astronomically complicated. I know, there's been a lot of dialogue in the world just about, schools have had all summer to think about this, but in actuality, schools were waiting to see and hoping with fingers crossed that kids were going to be able to go back in person. And so when you think about that, and then you think about, turning the boat of what a school district and a school system is, we're still talking about a matter of weeks that this has taken place. And, so not only is that just a gigantic task, but in terms of pedagogical decisions, a lot of the shifts are actually being thought through and built as we go. This is a new world in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I would agree with Stephanie 100%. I mean, some of us are excited by this because we've long thought that school as we know it should be upended anyways. My ongoing thought question is, here we are walking into the 21st century, trying to manage a system that was built 200 years ago, and that fundamentally didn't really have everybody in it, right? So we've incrementally let people in over time, right? The earliest schools, if you're looking at the United States, were not built for everyone. And in the old British system, the system of mercantilism from which our system originally came, Victorian education, it was a privileged system only for a few. And so each successive generation, we've tried to open the doors of an old system. And so I think, sadly, it took a pandemic, but COVID-19 has really literally put us all on pause, given us a minute to take a deep breath and really ask ourselves the big questions. Is this the kind of system we actually want? Is this the kind of system we actually need? Is this the kind of system that's going to take us into a future? So that's the big question that kind of guides me every day as I watch, my own kids navigate virtual schooling, as I watch my wife, who's also a teacher, navigate virtual schooling, as I myself navigate virtual schooling as a professor, right? Fortunately for us, we've been playing with it for a while, but I understand that the answer to that question would be we want to reinvent this thing. We want something different. So directly to your question about lesson plans, I've also long felt that some of the new ways in which we construct learning situations would alter how we plan and create instructional material, right? Just now, before we started this conversation, I was actually looking at a virtual reality platform, thinking to myself, well, if we were to make virtual reality the norm in educational programs, which is very possible now with remote learning, right? I can tell you my 4-year-old does not want to do this. But I think she might feel it a little differently if it was more interactive, if it was more personable, if she could even psychologically, virtually reach out and touch an object or touch a person, I think should feel more connected to it. So I'm looking at things like that and say, well, how do we get something like virtual reality into schools and classrooms? And what would that do to our lesson activities and our lesson planning? So, those are kind of like my big thinks about it and where my head is going. But I still think of it as a truly exciting opportunity to reinvent the kinds of things that we've wanted to see reinvented about school.
And
Yeah.
both touched on quite a lot there, and I'll jump to you in a second, Stephanie. So what I'm wondering is, I'm kind of piecing together what both of you have just said about both the challenges and the sort of boundless opportunity that we have here. Is, so if I'm a teacher and I'm thinking about, okay, I have to reconstruct sort of my lesson planning for this online format, how should I think about that? Should I be thinking about totally restructuring, the content and the methods of learning? Should I be trying to make it look as similar to face-to-face learning as possible? How should I be thinking about that? And Stephanie, we'll jump to you to kind of start out there.
I think one of the things that's important, it's important when we teach teachers, it's also important for teachers in the field to model for their students, is just like Dr. Basiyr said, that this is an exciting time, that this is a time for exploration and sort of pedagogical discussions that are long overdue. And now we have the opportunity to discuss. And so I think that, what we try to do in teacher education is to really model that wow, you're kind of you're in the thick of when we look back at this in history, you're going to be able to say, I was in that and I was a part of that. And I was in that conversation, which is an exciting thing. I think teachers in the classroom really also need to just model kind of this exploration, flexibility, sort of growth mindset way of approaching instruction. I think one of the worst things that teachers can do is to just say, like, we're on Zoom and this is horrible and we're just gonna try to suck it up until we get through this. I mean, that does not help anybody. So I think that's one thing that we need to really be mindful of. But the other aspect of lesson planning that I know I've struggled with just as a professor, trying to take some pretty complicated pedagogical blocks that I do in my own classes and try to make them work in a remote learning format. I think one of the biggest mistakes, or maybe an assumption that people make, is, okay, well, if I can try to make this look as close to on-ground instruction as I'm able to, that will make everybody feel more comfortable. And I think we can see that playing out right now in schools that are going back in person. So we're going to go back in person and we're going to that's going to be the most normal thing we can do. Well, if you've seen a classroom right now, you know that students are in cubicles, they're in masks, they're 6 feet apart, there is nothing normal about that. There isn't. And it actually, I think, does more to make the whole schooling process seem more foreign and unfamiliar, and does more to break community than it does to bring community together. And so I think we need to sort of go back to what we want to teach and think about the essence of what we're trying to get at. I'll give you an example. So in the summer, I co-teach a course, and it's about teacher presence. And it uses like drama and improv techniques, right? And it's a workshop, and we normally do it on ground. There is no way, if we said, hey, let's improv on Zoom, that doesn't work. We could say that feels normal. That's like what we did in the past, but I would tell you that would be an absolute disaster. And so what we had to really think about as instructors is, what is the essence of what we're trying to get at? We're trying to get at the spirit of play. We're trying to get at the spirit of workshopping and sort of sandboxing some things. what kind of platform allows us to do that? And so we were able to sort of onboard some different platforms that were absolutely not improv done in an on-ground class. So it looked radically different than what we did in the past, but it got at the essence of what we were trying to get at, just in a very different way. And so I think really, again, distilling down what are you wanting to teach to its essence, and then going and saying, so what tools do I have to allow me to then build that is really important for teachers to do.